Okay. Okay, welcome to this Special Legislation Committee meeting. I'm going to call the meeting to order. I thank you all for coming. It's a great turnout. Wherever you stand on, wherever you stand on the issue, this is a terrific showing of extraordinarily broad interest, and it should also give some impetus to the city engineer to hurry up and build the parking deck, so that we can not only spend that money but get that parking deck built, so that when we get folks that want to come and actually participate in local government on issues of importance, they will have no trouble whatsoever in parking. And I don't know if anybody here drives an electric car, but I am positive that for a small fee we're going to have a plug-in for you in that parking deck. But then, local that we are politicians, so don't hold me to that.
He's a politician.
Always the joker. Okay, so let me read this to you so everybody has an idea where we've been, how this came about, what our expectation is for tonight, and then where we go from here. When I came up here, I was thinking, I think I've actually written a presentation down maybe 3 times in the 7.5 years that I've been on city council, and usually I do it when I think I better do it, otherwise I'm going to miss something. So our meeting tonight is to learn about the issues encountered by LGBTQ members of our community to better enable city council and the administration to discuss and draft a comprehensive ordinance that will codify protections broadly banning discriminatory practices in our community. All of us in city government recognize the issue and the concern, and all of us are committed to working together for a successful resolution. But understand, this is not a partisan political issue. And here in this nonpartisan chamber, it won't be treated as a partisan political issue. The LGBTQ inclusive non-discrimination legislation was presented to our Finance Committee by Pam Miller and a group, most of the folks I think are here, a group of concerned citizens this past June 25th. Following their presentation, the issue was assigned to this committee for further discussion and review. Since January 25th, I have discussed this request with the administration as well as with city officials from other communities, and met and worked with this group, the group that initiated the request, with the goal of drafting legislation safeguarding LGBTQ individuals from discrimination. I have also received what I think, for me anyway, is a record amount of correspondence. Almost every day when I stop up at City Hall or I get a call from City Hall, there is more correspondence. And of the 80 or so letters, now there might be more, I'm not sure because more came in today. Of those 80 or more letters, there are 2 that were questioning the need, and the rest of them were all supportive of addressing this issue. Thanks. But here it is. This is the thing. I read every one of those letters. And I don't think that this will surprise anybody, but the letters are 2 things. They are pretty much the same. They are both heartwarming and they are both heartbreaking. They are letters from families, individuals, lawyers, ministers, priests, businesses, business people, teachers, chaplains, students, and victims of abuse and victims of discrimination. Letters heartwarming in the telling of this, they are heartwarming in the telling of kindness, in the telling of love, and in the telling of support for family members, friends, and neighbors. But they are as well heartbreaking in the telling of the struggle, the marginalization, and discrimination based simply and appallingly on someone's sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression. I've thought a lot about this. At every city council meeting that we hold in this chamber, we recite the Pledge of Allegiance. We all stand up and we look at the flag and we recite the Pledge of Allegiance. And in thinking about it, I was looking at the last 6 words. And the last 6 words of the Pledge of Allegiance are this. They are, with liberty and justice for all. With liberty and justice for all. So you can't help but understand that protection from discrimination is really a cornerstone of our national foundation. And clearly, ensuring that protection is the right thing to do. I counted those words twice to make sure there wasn't 5. But in all seriousness, moreover, this issue is not just about the LGBTQ community, not just about those individuals. This issue is about us. This issue is about our community and recognizing the full humanity of all people. And that seems like the right thing to do. So tonight, we are going to have a discussion. I have 2 members of this committee. I think most city council people are here. The mayor is here, parts of his administration. The law director is here as well. And of course, formally, the group that presented this to us is right here in the first 2 rows. So I will conduct the meeting as the chairperson of the committee. And following the presentation by the group that had requested city council address this issue, our committee will talk. And at that point, we will open up to the mayor, the law director, other members of city council. There are also people here that represent local businesses that may well be here because they would like to speak. And then we will open up the floor to any individuals that have come. Simply you came because you're interested in this, you're concerned about it, you want to know about it, and you want to say something. And at some point, watching the clock, I will ask you to limit your discussion and so that we aren't here until the wee hours of the morning. So I'm looking forward to what we're going to hear. This committee will not vote on we are not voting on it tonight. We have come so far that we have, since you came and this group came in June 25th, when we had no legislation here other than some samples. We have 2 pieces of legislation. They are similar in some aspects, and in some they are not. So the way we will go forward is this committee will have this discussion. We intend to listen to everybody here, take in what you have to say, and then we will have another special legislation committee meeting that is actually aimed more as a work session, so that we can see, and I believe we will, it's the way this city works, we will find a way to get this legislation put together so that it is broadly supported and can be codified and become part of our law. So that's the direction we will go. So if you were here and you only came to see us vote, come back on Monday or Tuesday actually after. Come back on Tuesday after Veterans Day break, and you can see us vote on a lot of things, but it won't be on this one. So thanks for hearing me out. I appreciate it. Again, I welcome you all, and we are going to start with Pam Miller. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lamb. Good evening. My name is Pam Miller, 450 Woodland Drive, Medina. In June, we came before City Council with a request for council action to enact an inclusive non-discrimination ordinance that would protect the rights of those who are gay, lesbian, or transgender. As you'll recall, we told you that those individuals are not currently protected under civil rights laws at the state or even federal level. Ohio is one of 28 states where it is still legal to fire someone or deny housing or access to public accommodations because that person is gay or transgender. Until the state of Ohio enacts such protection, cities around Ohio are passing legislation to do just that. In Northeast Ohio, Akron, Cleveland, Kent, Lakewood, Olmsted Falls, Youngstown, South Euclid have passed ordinances, and most recently, Cuyahoga County became the first county to do so. Let's lead the way in Medina and become the 22nd jurisdiction in Ohio to stand up for its residents and declare there are no second-class citizens in our community. We provided you with samples of ordinances from other cities, and you now have before you two proposed ordinances, one provided by the city's law director and one from our group. And I want to make sure that you do have the correct one. It's the one that at the top is titled Draft Version 10/23/2018, because there was another rough draft that had been sent that mistakenly. So this is the one that you should be looking at as we go forward. So what do we believe should be in the ordinance? First, by adopting an ordinance that clearly states your commitment to diversity, both that's sanctioned by federal and state laws already, as well as for the LGBT community, you will make a strong statement that the city is not granting any special rights to anyone, but merely ensuring that everyone has equal rights. You have already committed in a council resolution to the idea of equal rights for all. We ask now that you codify that commitment, extend the law to cover everybody. We advocate for the same protections and the same religious exemptions that exist in federal and state law. We also ask that the ordinance provide a means of recourse for anyone who believes that they've been discriminated against because of sexual orientation or gender identity. Some cities establish a human rights commission that can hear grievances. There are also multiple options for resolution in lieu of litigation, such as mediation, arbitration, and so forth. Why, you may ask, do we need a law to protect the LGBT community? Is there widespread discrimination? Do we have examples of such discrimination? All too often, those who are marginalized in our society hesitate to speak out, fearing the consequences. It is only fair that these rights that everyone else enjoys should be extended, and that it be established in law. Having a law in place will ensure that no one's rights are violated, that everyone can live in or visit our city with a degree of confidence that they are safe. The reason any law is passed is to provide a framework that shows what is legal and what a community's values are. That's how we keep order and maintain a safe environment for all. Adopting an ordinance on inclusive non-discrimination just makes sense. Tonight, you will hear from community members, from parents of LGBTQ children, from gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender members of the community. We will provide insight on constitutional issues, on bathrooms, on housing issues. This ordinance is good for business. Major corporations who operate in Medina County and employ and serve our residents understand the need for diversity, for having access to the brightest and best employees, and for promoting acceptance within their organizations, which is why diversity is a key area of interest identified in the Medina County Economic Development Corporation's strategic plan that will be unveiled this month. You will hear from members of the clergy speaking in support, and from teachers and students. Already, I believe you have received many supportive letters, as Mr. Lamb said, some of them describing heart-wrenching personal experiences of discrimination. You will also hear about good experiences, and both are solid evidence of why this ordinance should be adopted, both to protect those who are discriminated against, as well as to signify that we are a good community that wants to embrace all its citizens. And now let me turn this over to the others. First, we're going to hear from the Varndell family.
Good evening. We are Eric and Sandy and Clara Varndell, 1014 Smoke Rise Drive, Medina. For nearly 20 years, we've been residents and active members of both Medina and church communities. We're proud parents of 2 young adults, aged 25 and 20, both of whom graduated from Medina High School, and both of whom are LGBTQ. Claire's with us today, and Ross is currently serving our country as a team leader with AmeriCorps and is on assignment and not able to join us today. He did, however, write a statement which I will read on his behalf in a moment. We are all here in support of the non-discrimination ordinance protecting all LGBTQ residents in the areas of housing, employment, and public accommodations. We'll each say a few words before reading our other statements. So I'm a father and executive at a prominent corporation in Cleveland where the value of diversity is held high. While my role as a father is understandably the main driver of my support for this ordinance, I think my perspective as a member of the Northeast Ohio business community is also an important thing to consider. When Ross came out to us as transgender, I admittedly grappled with the concept. Are you sure? Was at least one thought. I could imagine what difficulties he would face in his path. But bravery takes many forms in our community. And in this journey, I've come to meet the bravest amongst us. Those, like Ross, who take on the social risk of gender transition because they are sure of who they really are. As parents, it's our passion and indeed our duty to do all that we can to help, protect, and support our children, to express who they truly are. Today, I embrace the accurate expression of my son and my daughter. And as many other parents can relate, I'm sure, I cannot stand by idly and risk an injustice happening to either child that is sanctified by the lack of laws against it. As I mentioned, I'm also a leader in a corporation in the broader community of Northeast Ohio. As you will hear today from other members of the business community, the protection of fundamental rights is critical in the intensely competitive attraction and retention of vital talent required for success. Corporations get it. We understand the importance of support for organizations like Equality Ohio, LGBTQ employee resource groups, and ally programs. It's not just being good corporate citizens, it's good for the community at large. I would encourage the same type of passion, understanding, and support be exhibited by our community in Medina. I know that I'm not alone in feeling surprised that this concept is still at debate. In short, I want our son and daughter to feel free to choose to move back to Medina to live and contribute to the community. I don't want them to feel concerned about losing housing or a job in the community in which they were raised and call their hometown, simply because they are fully expressing who they are. Thank you.
As a member of the Medina community in many ways, I would like to outline why I support a non-discrimination ordinance here in Medina. As a licensed social worker who takes very seriously the importance of treating every client of mine with dignity and respect, I cannot fathom denying anyone assistance for any reason, and certainly not for being an LGBTQ person. As a person of faith, I believe that God created and loves each of us equally, no exceptions. I cannot accept that God would create only one type of human being, be it racial, be it religious, be it ethnic, or be it in sexual orientation or gender identity. God created diversity. My God created all of us and loves us exactly how we are. God would not exclude LGBTQ people from protections as current law in Medina does. As someone who has been involved in Girl Scouts for 15 years of my life, 10 years of them here in Medina as a Girl Scout leader, I promise to make the world a better place every week. I believe by enacting a non-discrimination ordinance, the world will be made a better place for all of us, not just the LGBTQ community. And as the president and co-founder of OutSupport Inc., Medina's LGBTQ support, education, and advocacy group, I try every day to make the lives of LGBTQ people here in Medina somewhat better. I've been blessed by getting to know many of the bravest people I would ever meet, those in the transgender community. The personal strength it takes to live one's authentic self is more than most people realize. And I hope that OutSupport has played a positive role in the many aspects of transition for these individuals. It pains me to see those in leadership in this nation try to actively make the lives difficult for transgender people. OutSupport makes efforts in the following ways to support our lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning neighbors, relatives, and friends by hosting monthly support group meetings where hundreds of people have attended to find strength on our journeys. Our Transgender 101 education program, which seeks to educate businesses, churches, and community groups about what it means to be transgender and how to be an ally. To supporting this ordinance to make sure that LGBTQ persons of Medina have legal recourse in the event of a firing, eviction, or refusal of service based solely on one's sexual orientation or gender identity. And the most important role, however, as I stand here this evening, is that of the mom of two of the most impressive young people you will ever meet. Eric and I would love to have them move back to Medina to live their adult lives, if that is something they choose. They are both creative young adults and will contribute to the cultural and economic vitality of this city. Ross will be pursuing a graduate degree in environmental public health upon his return from service with AmeriCorps, having already received his Bachelor of Science in Nursing, graduating with honors. Clara continues her undergraduate education and has already contributed to this community through her summer internships with the Medina County Health Department. She will be a positive influence on the public health wherever she chooses to live upon graduation. We love them both and will be proud of them wherever their lives take them, and we would be happy if that were Medina. And Eric will read Ross's statement at this time.
So this was written by Ross. I'm writing to express my support for the non-discrimination ordinance for LGBTQ citizens living in Medina. I spent a good part of my childhood in Medina and consider it my hometown. I'm a graduate of Medina High School and Kent State University College of Nursing. I've worked at 2 major Northeast Ohio healthcare systems and clinically at many others. I've been out as asexual and transgender for 5 years, have great family support, have never been turned down for a job or apartment because I'm transgender, and have rarely faced overt transphobia as a student, patient, healthcare provider, or private citizen. However, these positive experiences took place outside of Medina in thriving cities, counties, and educational environments where non-discrimination is the norm. I support this ordinance because I want more people to have my experience of life. Being LGBTQ may make someone's experience of themselves diverse, but it shouldn't make their experience of life one of discrimination, and especially not when that discrimination is condoned by the local legal system. Medina is a beautiful town full of people who care and want the best for their community. But we fall behind economically and culturally when we fail to guarantee that people from all walks of life, including those of us that in the LGBT community, will have the same rights as our straight and cisgender neighbors. I want people like me to be able to choose to live in Medina without fear that they will have no legal recourse if they are denied housing, employment, or services for living openly as LGBTQ persons. Currently, I'm serving our country as a team leader with the Residential National Service Program. Throughout my term of service, I've had the opportunity to serve throughout the Midwest, experience a range of communities, and work with a diverse group of young adults like myself. I've seen firsthand the overwhelmingly positive impact that communities that welcome diversity has, and it is clear that this comes about through legal protections for all facets of diversity. I hope Medina chooses to follow in the footsteps of these communities and adopts legislation that ensures no group of people, including LGBTQ community, is legally excluded from the basic opportunities concerning housing, employment, and public accommodations.
Hello, my name is Clara Varndell. I'm here today to show my support for this important ordinance. I grew up in Medina. This is the city that I call my hometown, and I think that it was a beautiful city to grow up in. That being said, there are ways that Medina could improve and become more beautiful and more welcoming. One of these ways is establishing this ordinance. I graduated from Medina High School in 2016, where I was heavily involved with the Gay Straight Alliance, now the Gender Sexuality Alliance. I held position on the board for 3 years because they didn't let freshmen have board positions. This club is very important to me, and as my brother founded this club while he attended Medina High School. The GSA helps teens feel more comfortable attending school and provides a safe space for learning and exploring their sexuality or gender, along with education on these topics. While this ordinance may not provide the education the GSA provides, it helps create a community where the LGBTQ plus persons feel the support that the GSA has provided for the students at Medina High School. I'm currently a junior public health major attending Kent State University. While Kent is known for many things, it is known for its history with the LGBTQ community, being the first university to have an LGBTQ student group. Kent also has a non-discrimination ordinance passed, making it so people have the ability to live their authentic lives without fear of being fired from their jobs, losing their homes, or even living day to day while simply being their authentic self. I identify as bisexual, and living in a city that has an ordinance passed allows me to hold my position as a resident assistant without fear and allows me to be free to love who I love. Passing a similar ordinance in Medina would allow myself and many others to have the same protections and support that we would receive in Kent and many other cities in Ohio. People may be more likely to move here following graduation if they knew they still have the freedom to live and love how they please here. This ordinance would open the door to becoming a safer and more inclusive city to live in for all. Please support.
By passing a non-discrimination ordinance, Medina will be a role model to other cities of this size and will make Medina even more attractive to those considering moving here, living their lives here as fully contributing members of society. Our family asks that you support a non-discrimination ordinance for LGBTQ persons in areas of housing, employment, and public accommodations in Medina. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Aaron Demlow. I'm a 20-year-old transgender man. I grew up in Medina and graduated from Medina High School in the Medina County Career Center. I've known my gender ever since I can remember. It was not taught to me. I was born feeling this way. And for years I tried to suppress and change the way I feel, but I simply have no choice but to accept who I am or to live a profoundly unhappy life. I'm here today because it's wrong to discriminate against LGBT people in the workplace. No one should be given less opportunity or treated differently for loving a certain gender or for finding their own. These things are simply not a choice. I have feared for the security of my job after coming out to employers. I hear disparaging names and jokes about my community made by my fellow employees and managers when I go into work. Once I heard my general manager profusely say the F slur, so I pulled her aside and asked her not to say those words anymore, and then came out to her as transgender. Soon after, rumors around work started to circulate, and she told all the other managers that I am trans, who then proceeded to tell their employee friends. Everyone suddenly knew I'm transgender, and it makes me feel unsafe. And I still work there today, and every time I go into work, I'm afraid of what may happen. I also have a transgender friend who worked at a food establishment in Medina for over 2 years. He was a dedicated worker and who was about to be promoted. Somehow, though, his manager discovered he was transgender and fired him soon after with no explanation. This is outrageously unfair and downright discrimination. And for the religious rights advocates, wouldn't you agree that all humans are sinners and that only God may judge others? I was taught that God wanted us to love thy neighbor. There are millions of people like me all over the country who have the same fears I do, but if this legislation passes, it would put all of the LGBT citizens living in Medina a little more at ease, making them feel safe and secure in their job and their community as any other person would. Thank you.
The city of Medina was recently recognized by Ohio Magazine as one of 5 best hometowns in the state of Ohio in which to live, work, and visit for 1819. This is, in fact, a second-time recognition since 2010 for the city of Medina in the 13 years that Ohio Magazine has named best hometowns. Medina is at the helm of one of the fastest-growing and most prosperous counties in northeastern Ohio. It's no wonder that people, like me and my better half of almost a decade, who is standing right by here in attendance, have decided to call this region home. My name is Curtis Hoffman, and it has been a joy to celebrate alongside each of you the progress of this city in its evolving iterations of revitalization. I'm an atypical millennial, not simply because of my difficult decision to come out as a member of the LGBTQ community during my years at John Carroll University, the Jesuit Catholic University in Cleveland. I'm an atypical millennial because I've chosen to embrace a gruesome commute along I-71 to and from where I work in the 44106, Cuyahoga County, at Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine, and sing with one of the world's greatest orchestras as a member of the Cleveland Orchestra Chorus at Severance Hall in order to be able to peacefully live among some of Ohio's finest in the 44256 Medina. It's unfortunate that we are unable to fully engage with peace of mind in the charms of the square, the farmers market, the ice and art week festivals, and our fine dining favorites, including the House of Hunan, the backdrop of our first date. 2 decades into the 21st century, we still need reinforcement that diversity and inclusion are core values. Non-discrimination protections to include sexual orientation, gender identity and expression in housing, employment, and public accommodations aren't yet a reality. Marry we can, but we don't always feel safe. And Medina City Council has the unique opportunity to ensure we are protected from discrimination where we play, live, and work, while the state of Ohio catches up with the city of Medina's progressive stance in embracing the full scope of diversity with all of its categories. To align the cities of Medina's motto, preserving the past, forging the future, with projections of the area's increasing population and economic trends, I strongly encourage this group, as an eventually to be married man.
No pressure.
And yes, we would certainly want the Honeybee Bakery or Root Candles to help mark our occasion, to consider passing this LGBTQ non-discrimination ordinance. Catch yourselves up with the gift of diversity that accompanies increased growth rates. Forge ahead in your own terms, in your motto, and continue to attract the best our region offers. Like me, my +1 here, my friends and colleagues in this room, by protecting us equally in the places we love. No more, no less for your neighbors like us. Thank you.
Mr. Lamb, and other members of the committee, Mr. Mayor, neighbors, I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name's Sue Hudson. I live over on Falling Oaks Drive. I've been a resident of Medina for 32 years. Like you, I've made it home, and we've raised a family in this community. But unlike you, I dare say my family is not the same. In 1981, I met and fell in love with my spouse, Diane Heck, over there. We knew we had a forever kind of love. We had some pressures from society, and it made it a very unlikely kind of love. But 37 years ago, we shared the start of a life that was kept quiet, often blanketed in secrecy and fear. So much fear. Okay. Friends and family could explain away our constant togetherness as being good friends. We didn't have the luxury of shouting our love from the mountaintops like many of you have. In 1993, after 12 years together, in denial from many quarters, we started our own family. And suddenly our love and commitment to one another could not so easily be explained away or refused. We were a family. We couldn't be swept under the rug. We willingly, even gleefully, took our place doing the mundane tasks of parenting. It was in Medina that we chose to do that. With our girls going to the nursery, we found a cohort of supportive friends that validated our family and supported us. I'm sure that some of those parents are here tonight. In fact, I know they are. And their parents' parents. The girls grew through their school years. They went to Medina City Schools, where they distinguished themselves both academically and in extracurriculars. Our oldest graduated from the College of Worcester and now has 2 years left to complete a degree in PhD in analytical chemistry, while our youngest will soon be graduating from Kenyon College. And for those of you who might remember, she spoke at her commencement about inclusion and non-judgment. Some of you may remember that speech. Well, we had to insist on it at first. Medina accepted us. We lived our lives as good neighbors and good friends, supportive parents and model citizens, and mostly nobody gave a damn who we loved. Fast forward to June 26, 2015. The Supreme Court in Obergefell versus Hodges, emanating from Ohio, by the way, in Cincinnati, extended marriage rights to same-sex couples across the country. The decision was handed down at about 11 o'clock in the morning. I was in a meeting with my office, and they actually stopped the meeting so that everybody could cheer it on. By 5 o'clock, our daughters were already planning our wedding, because clearly it was important to them. So on August 15th, 2015, Diane and I legally married in a ceremony in Fran and Clay Benjamin's backyard. 150 of our friends, including some of you who are here, Mr. Simpson, Mrs. Simpson, you were at the wedding. They were there. We had support from florists, bakers, a rental company, and so many others. It was the best day of my life, and it took a community to make it happen. So why synopsis my life in Medina? Because Medina is a community of loving neighbors. That's who we are. We support each other and we care for one another. But did you know that my wife and I have no protections in housing, public service, or public goods or services here? Did you know that since the passage of the marriage rights decision by the SCOTUS, there's still 42% of LGBTQ workers experiencing discrimination and a full 90% of transgendered workers that are experiencing discrimination? By publicly denouncing discrimination and becoming a welcoming community, Medina could join 20 cities and 1 county in our state in saying that we value all people. I believe that individually we do. I've lived it. I've breathed it. The economic toll of discrimination against the LGBTQ community is estimated to be millions and maybe even billions. What will it cost you to pass this legislation? Not a dime. I urge you to represent who we are. That's what you were elected to do. We're loving, accepting, kind neighbors. Let the world know it. Shout it out and highlight the love in this community. Open our doors.
Thank you.
Mayor Hanwell, Mr. Huber, Mr. Lamb, Mr. Rose, Mr. Shields, friends and family. I am writing to encourage the Medina City Council to pass an ordinance that protects the civil and human rights of all persons, specifically members of the LGBTQ community. I've lived most of my life in Medina and was a merchant on the square for 23 years. In the mid-1990s, I lived in Medina Township. During this time, I encountered the following from neighbors directly next door to me and in the neighborhood. After repeatedly replacing my bashed and broken mailbox, I created one with a cement liner. The response was that the new mailbox was bombed, with the local police saying that it was enough explosive to blow up a 2-ton automobile. I came home and found my security sign system supporting a sign that read, "Andrew Cunanan, come here next." This was during the time of the murder of designer Gianni Versace. My home had large expanses of windows and were constantly barraged with rocks. The people would hide behind their barn and throw the rocks over the top of the barn so you couldn't catch them or video them. After politely speaking with the parents of the suspected children, the barrage continued and became stronger. The parents were encouraging the children's activities. They would often open the windows in the spring and yell out "fags" toward our home. These same neighbors had a large bonfire with Medina High School students attending. The entire group started yelling "fags" and "queers" loudly to our home. For well over an hour, our lawn was turfed the same night. The police were called and did nothing. In the summer, I would often be woken in the middle of the night with a doorbell being rung. I eventually stayed up late enough to identify the high school student as my neighbor. The police would not do anything. I woke up one night with red target lasers from a gun being shot into the master bedroom through the house's large windows. This was very scary and intimidating. Most mornings, I would find garbage in our railroad tie planters at the street. I finally was going to work one morning at 4 a.m. and I caught the man dropping the trash. He was a local Medina businessman that also lived in the area. When the police confronted him, he admitted that he had done it, and I promised not to prosecute if he promised to stop doing it. The weekend we moved from that home, the trash started again. After the harassment at the bonfire, I called to speak with the Medina High School principal. I encouraged her to advocate LGBTQ education. Nothing happened. I'm proud of the progress Medina has made in so many areas of growth in so many ways. As we all become more educated, I believe the timing is appropriate after the same legislation was recently passed in Cuyahoga County. Diversity offers a sense of pride and draws talented, creative, dedicated people to a community. Thank you for your consideration. Alan Parkhurst, 1150 Chapman Lane.
Thank you, Alan, for sharing that with us tonight. And good evening, members of council. I'm Joe Matazeski, and it's a pleasure to speak with you again following the Finance Committee meeting in late June. Since that time, I'm proud to say that my in-laws have become residents of Ward 4, and next week, my father will become another resident of Ward 4, so that's right, the Matazeski family is here to stay. Also since that time, I know there have been various discussions involving key stakeholders within Medina, and whether advancing this ordinance is the necessary thing to do or an appropriate action to be taken. And I've also heard from time to time that businesses don't want this, or that businesses don't see a need to pass this fully inclusive non-discrimination protection. Members of council, that can't be further from the truth. At our last presentation to you in June, I introduced you all to Ohio Business Competes, and I'd like to take just a few moments tonight to go into some additional detail. OBC is a nonpartisan coalition of now over 500 corporations, small and medium enterprises, universities, not-for-profits, and professional services firms doing business throughout Ohio that all agree on one key concept. It's time for LGBTQ inclusive non-discrimination protection in employment, housing, and public services throughout Ohio. These businesses have put their names and their logos, many logos, as you can see on the sign up there, saying that this is what they want to do, affirming this belief. And I can tell you from personal experience, this action is not taken lightly by any company on that list in terms of making such a bold public statement. These businesses carefully examined what is at issue, balancing considerations such as administrative burden or increased compliance and oversight with the overwhelming benefit to our economic development and our community. Now, by now, I'm sure you've all read this other sign to my right. And while I fully recognize this isn't every company in Medina, we've attempted to provide you with a diverse subset of businesses operating in or around the city that have signed on to Ohio Business Competes. At the top, we've listed a handful of local businesses based in Medina. Below that, those larger companies that do business here in Medina. And then the Fortune 500 companies based throughout the state where we hope to have their employees and families living and paying tax in Medina, supporting our business and housing market. You know, in just the 2 short years that this list has been building, we've compiled an extensive group of organizations that have said, yes, we support this, we want this is right for business. And while I would personally love to read the names of all 515 companies that have signed on to OBC, I know we don't have the time for that this evening. So please take a moment to visit ohiobusinesscompetes.org for a complete listing and more information. So let me close by just making this personal for one moment. I fully recognize that most of the companies on this list already have LGBTQ inclusive non-discrimination policies of their own. I'm proud to be a partner with the firm Ernst & Young, where I know that I'm protected. But if it wasn't for those protections afforded by my employer, there's no way my family could have moved to Medina. I couldn't fathom the fear of being fired simply for being a gay man and knowing there'd be no legal remedy where I live. That being said, it pains me to know that every day when I come home to my hometown, I could be legally refused services, such as eating dinner at a restaurant on the square with my family, simply because of my sexual orientation. This is the bullet I can't say. And this not only negatively impacts my husband, who's standing up there, but could also very much jeopardize the welfare and happiness of our 2.5-year-old daughter, Addison, who we chose to raise here. I don't know how to look at her and tell her that her parents don't have equal rights under the law. But I'm really hoping I don't have to do that. You have the remarkable opportunity to become the 22nd community in Ohio to include sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression within the same non-discrimination protections already afforded to members of different races, genders, and religions. This is about equal rights, not special rights. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Councilman, Mayor, Mr. Huber. My name is Amy Demlow, and I live at 763 Victoria Circle. Joe hit on the Ohio Business Competes movement in corporate America, supported by businesses throughout the state of Ohio who believe a diverse workforce is good for business. A diverse workforce generally means a bigger pool of ideas and solutions. More than 20 Ohio cities have adopted non-discrimination legislation. Not only does this help those cities attract the LGBTQ community and their allies, but they also attract our young people to live and work in those cities. Today's young people are inclusive. They want to live in areas that share the same values. You've heard many excellent reasons why LGBTQ individuals have moved to Medina or desire to return home in the future. Passing this non-discrimination legislation is a critical step to convincing our young people and other LGBTQ individuals that Medina truly welcomes all. Businesses have no increased compliance obligation or administrative burden. It will be business as usual for those companies who are not currently discriminating. Gay and transgender workers deserve a fair chance at earning an honest living that allows them to support themselves and their families. A strong workforce supports the local economy and housing market, enhancing Medina's reputation as a great place to work and play. Bringing it home, when our community has a pool of diverse candidates, it allows Medina businesses to compete, not only with other Ohio locations, but also in a global economy. Customers and clients ask about their suppliers or service providers' diversity policies and company demographics. A company may have the best diversity policy, but without a diverse workforce to back it up, the sale or opportunity may slip away. In 2016, the North Carolina legislature passed House Bill 2, a bathroom bill that said people had to use the restroom according to their birth certificate. This proved disastrous, pulling more than $3.7 billion worth of business from the state's economy. The concerns about bathrooms are rooted in misconceptions about the transgender community. It associates transgender individuals with pedophiles and abusers, which is simply not true. Though we're not talking about a bathroom bill, we realize it's important to educate the community about unfounded objections to non-discrimination protections. Non-discrimination laws, like the one we're advocating for here, do not invalidate laws against sexual assault, voyeurism, or other similar acts. They simply protect those who are doing the right thing. Attracting the best talent is only possible when the employee can be their true self in the workplace. Job satisfaction and productivity is maximized when employees feel included. Not only is inclusion the right thing to do, it's also good for the company's bottom line, which can only benefit the city. Recent news has caused the LGBTQ community and their allies to have great concerns about their rights. In uncertain times, you have the opportunity to provide certainty to Medina residents, workers, and visitors. Thank you for your work on this issue.
Good evening, members of the council, members of the community. My name is Chad Eggspeeler. I'm an alumnus of The Ohio State University Moritz College of Law. former law clerk, 2 federal judges in the District of New Jersey, and our own Circuit Judge Deborah Cook here in the 6th Circuit. Currently in an appellate litigation practice in Tucker Ellis in Cleveland. And though I live in neighboring Akron, I feel like a part of the larger Medina community, having participated in a pub trivia league here for the past 2 years. I'm honored to be here today in my individual capacity to speak in favor of the non-discrimination ordinance. As we've heard from so many speakers and in the letters, it makes Medina more competitive in recruiting and in keeping talented people. It signals Medina's open doors to the LGBT community. It's not about special rights, it's about equal access in the marketplace and in the community. It's simply the right thing to do. I've provided a longer statement with the history of legal discrimination against the LGBT community to the council for its review. But tonight, in the interest of time and my words, I'd like to focus on how the progress of the non-discrimination ordinance can be accomplished in harmony with religious liberty. The people of Ohio, just like the people everywhere in this country and around the world, have deeply held and a myriad religious, moral, and existential beliefs. Our country has a long tradition, as does Ohio, of protecting that, both the free exercise of religion and preventing the establishment of religion. A non-discrimination ordinance does not force people to change their religious, moral, and value opinions, or how they express those opinions in the marketplace of ideas, nor could it. But a non-discrimination public accommodations provision like this merely ensures equal access to the marketplace. The Supreme Court's recent decision in Masterpiece Cake Shop presents no obstacle to this ordinance. Importantly, the court's majority opinion recognized, and I quote, "Our society has come to the recognition that gay persons and gay couples cannot be treated as social outcasts or as an inferior in dignity and worth. For that reason, the laws and the Constitution can, and in some instances must, protect them in the exercise of their civil rights. The exercise of their freedom on terms equal to others must be given great weight and respect by the courts." The chairman began tonight by saying this is a nonpartisan issue. Sometimes our judges, especially in recent days, have been cast as just partisan officials. But what was interesting here is Chief Justice Roberts, Justice Alito, Justice Gorsuch signed on to this reasoning. So this can be a nonpartisan issue. The Masterpiece Cake Shop Court also reaffirmed the general rule established in the 60s civil rights case Newman versus Piggy Park, that though the First Amendment protects religious freedom, such religious or conscience-based objections, quote, "do not allow business owners and other actors in the economy and in society to deny protected persons equal access to goods and services under a neutral and generally applicable public accommodations law," end quote. Indeed, as the Masterpiece Court said, quote, "It's unexceptional that Colorado law can protect gay persons just as it can protect other classes of individuals in acquiring whatever products and services they choose on the same terms and conditions as are offered to other members of the public," end quote. In other words, there is no general First Amendment right to exclude citizens from basic public accommodations that so many of us take for granted: restaurants, shops, housing, workplace protections. That is all the ordinance seeks to protect: equal access in the marketplace. The constitutional sin addressed in Masterpiece Cake Shop was religious bias in the application of the law, Colorado's Non-Discrimination Act. The court highlighted 2 specific flaws with the application in its finding of a free exercise violation. 1, it highlighted anti-religious comments by one Colorado commissioner during the administrative proceedings of that case. 2, it noted an uneven application of the law with regard to bakeries that had refused a Christian customer's separate cake request. Neither of those flaws are present in the proposed ordinance. We know that the Masterpiece Cake Shop case does not bar generally applicable non-discrimination public accommodations laws because it said so. We also know this because this summer the Arizona Court of Appeals had a similar case right after Masterpiece. And in Brescia Nib Studio versus Phoenix, which came out in late June of this year, The Arizona Court of Appeals said the ordinance does not target religious groups or viewpoints. There are no signs of anti-religious bias in the law. There is no First Amendment violation. Under this case law, the proposed ordinance is a permissible, generally applicable law regulating conduct, nothing more. Respectfully, the council should not permit worries about a hypothetical First Amendment challenge someday down the road to prevent meaningful and necessary workplace and public accommodations protections for the LGBTQ community. Thank you for your time and service. I'm happy to answer any questions if at any point the committee so has. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Lauren Green Hall. Though I live in Akron, I come to you today in my professional role as the Associate Director of Fair Housing Contact Service. We are a nonprofit organization that has been in service for over 53 years, providing comprehensive housing-related services, including tenant-landlord information, housing discrimination investigation and advocacy, and services to homeowners, including foreclosure intervention, counseling, first-time homebuyer counseling, and reverse mortgage counseling. Medina, the city of Medina, the county of Medina is within our service area, and we have been providing these services in this area for years. This year, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Federal Fair Housing Act. Excuse me. However, we still see significant concerns of housing discrimination around our community. I want you to take a moment to think about where you feel safest. I hope that's your home. But what if one day someone told you you could no longer live in your home, or you were being harassed in your home as the stories we've heard here this evening have occurred? Would you still feel safe? Would that still be your safe place? Our agency works to address those issues to ensure that individuals have their home as their safest place. We support this ordinance before you to increase protections in Medina. We are thrilled to see the city of Medina take steps to ensure that all of the residents of this city have an equal opportunity to housing of their choice. Fair Housing Contact Service specifically excited to see the addition of the protected classes not covered by our state or federal law. These additions will allow persons who have been discriminated against an avenue to address their concerns that does not currently exist at our state or federal level. I want to give you some statistics. I know statistics aren't what everyone wants to hear, but I want you to understand a few for a minute. I reached out to the Ohio Civil Rights Commission, which is our statewide body where folks can address concerns of housing discrimination in an administrative capacity. For the city of Medina, since 2015, 34 charges of discrimination were filed. That was 25 charges of employment discrimination, 1 with concerns of higher education, and 8 housing discrimination charges. Now, mind you, these are only the charges that were filed with OCRC. This does not account for charges filed with the Department of Housing and Urban Development or the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which work on a federal level. Additionally, it doesn't count anyone that filed charges in court as well. So that's just through the Ohio Civil Rights Commission. And it's unknown if any of these concerns were regarding sexual orientation or gender identity or expression, because that's not tracked, because it isn't protected at our federal or our state level. Our agency, during that same time, received 4 allegations of only housing discrimination. Those had nothing to do with the 8 charges that were filed with the Ohio Civil Rights Commission. Additionally, we received 75 calls just from the city of Medina from residents that had concerns of housing discrimination, and there weren't additional avenues that we could take to assist them. So, what I give you these statistics for today is because discrimination does occur, unfortunately. But you have the power to make it so that folks have an avenue to address their concerns of discrimination when they do occur. There were studies that were conducted in the city of Akron and in Cuyahoga County over the last number of years that monitored discrimination against individuals on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. The results of that study showed that 1 in 3 individuals that identify as LGBTQ are being discriminated against in their housing. This doesn't talk about employment. This doesn't talk about areas of public accommodation. It's only about housing. That's a lot of people to be discriminated against and have no way of addressing it. Again, my statistics mean nothing compared to the stories that you have heard here this evening. The stories of individuals and the experiences that they have endured will speak volumes more than numbers ever will, in my opinion. But you have the opportunity to address this. As a civil rights activist in my professional life, but as a wife, a mother, and a woman who enjoys the amenities that the city of Medina offers, I urge you to pass this legislation and provide protections to all of your community members this evening. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm the Reverend Luke Linden of 1057 Larkins Way, pronouns he, him, and his, and I am an ordained United Church of Christ pastor. I serve the United Church of Christ here in town, but I'm not speaking on their behalf. I am speaking as an ordained person of faith, a citizen, a father. Like this room, my congregation has many views on the issues of LGBTQIA plus protections. But I am here on my own behalf. Because 2 years ago, around this time, when they agreed to call me as their senior pastor, I promised them this, that no one would be barred from leadership and full participation due to their sexual orientation or gender identity under my leadership as their pastor. This comes not in spite of my Christian conviction, but because of them. And now prepare yourself for a drive-by Bible study. In seminary, I studied all the clobber passages, those few verses that supposedly deal with homosexuality. What I found was astonishing. Starting with the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, the sin of sodomy, which we think of as about being gay, is not that, biblically or up until the 19th century. The prophet Ezekiel in chapter 16, verse 49 says, "Now this was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and the needy." Yes, the sin of Sodom is inhospitality. I found hospitality here in Medina. I've been a resident here for a year and a half. And I love this community, and I think our hospitality is what makes us vibrant and thriving. And that's what I'm working on in my own congregation. We can bring about all sorts of single Bible verses, but we miss the bigger narrative of Scripture, which is always an opening. The Bible is clear that Moabites are bad, and Deuteronomy 23 says that they are not allowed to dwell with God's people. Yet Ruth is a Moabite and is in the lineage of both King David and Jesus. Jeremiah 25 states that the people from Uz are evil, yet Job is from Uz and was the most blameless man on earth. Deuteronomy 23 keeps eunuchs from joining the assembly of God, yet the first person Philip baptizes in Acts chapter 8 is the Ethiopian eunuch in a mud puddle. The Samaritans are awful, and everybody knew that God hated them until the God in Christ tells a parable where the Samaritan is a good guy. The Bible is always working to turn our hearts of stone into hearts for love alone, love of God with our whole heart, mind, and soul, and our neighbor as ourself. Upon these things rest all the law and prophet. This is the past I wish to preserve as we forge a future that is hospitable to all and protects those who are most vulnerable in our community. This ordinance, I believe, goes a long way in doing just that, to show that we are a welcoming and hospitable community where people know they can't be fired or evicted for being who they were made to be. That would inspire investment civic engagement in that community. Thank you for your time.
My name is Jennifer Ayler, and I am speaking to you today as a concerned citizen, as a teacher, and as the Genders and Sexualities Alliance Advisor at Medina High School. I care deeply about making Medina a safe and inclusive community for all people, but especially for our youth. I have been a teacher in Medina for 16 years. I became involved with the GSA when a group of students approached me and Dr. Bonnie Waslick 10 years ago because we seemed cool and open-minded. But I became committed to the group that same year when we invited an MHS alumni to speak about being a lesbian in Medina and how things have changed for LGBTQ people since she attended school there. I'll never forget how she held my hand, thanked me for my work, and told me that I'm saving lives through my support of our kids in our group. Since then, I have been dedicated to providing a welcoming place for LGBTQ students and their allies. Every month, students come to my classroom for a place to feel accepted and supported for who they are. Depending on the topic of the meeting that month, anywhere between 20 to 40 students will attend to share experiences, help others, or to hear from guest speakers about life after high school. In fact, most recently, this past October 11th, the GSA hosted about 50 students, parents, and community members in our 9th annual Ally Coffee Break Chat to have conversations about how we can build a supportive community for all citizens. Our students need to hear that the judgment, bullying, and insecurity they are experiencing won't last forever, that it will get better. Some people might try to dismiss or diminish the harassment and alienation LGBTQ youth are experiencing by saying kids will be kids. But what are they supposed to think when the adults in their community are allowed to use the same disparaging remarks or marginalizing behaviors in employment or public services? I don't want to mislead them, but if their community can't provide the guarantees we're asking for in this ordinance, then I don't know how else I can give them hope. I feel proud of the work I've done with students as the GSA advisor to create a safe space at MHS. I hear from students on a daily basis who wish they could just stay in my room all day because of how welcoming and comfortable it is. They can be themselves and know they are treated with respect, but sadly, the safety in my room isn't enough. And even though Medina High School works to provide a safe environment by supporting programs and events such as Anti-Bullying Week, See Something, Say Something, Unity Day, and Day of Silence, there are students who complain that they have been harassed when they attend classes, eat lunch, walk in the hallway, or use the bathroom of their own gender identity. Many teachers and administrators make every effort to support all students, but we can only reach so far. Outside the school walls, the undue harassment is further legitimized when employers, landlords, and business owners of public services are allowed to conduct the same discrimination. Supporting this ordinance doesn't create special rights or different rights for LGBTQ people. It establishes equality for all people, and it communicates to our youth that all people, regardless of identity or orientation, are valued and respected. I now invite you to hear from one of my students who is an active student leader at MHS.
Hello, my name is Sarah Hogue, and I am a student leader at Medina High School. Over the past years, I've become an increasingly active member in the community, meeting wonderful people from all walks of life. The majority of my friends and acquaintances, as a result, have different sexual orientations and gender identities. Our students have begun to feel more comfortable coming out to their peers, but it is necessary for them to have legal rights as well. It never fails to amaze me how many of our children are silent members of the LGBTQ community, and we must act quickly to ensure future generations have the same rights as any other resident. Let us tell you about the discriminations that LGBTQ children and teens face in our city. Let us explain how we are setting them up for failure if we don't give them the same protections. Let our youth come forward and let them tell you about what it's like to be ostracized from society. Let me tell you about my friend, Rachel, who was in the homecoming court this year. She's an accomplished student, a lover of music, and a great friend. That didn't stop other people from calling her derogatory names and hateful slurs while Rachel was saying her speech, all because she was gay. Let me tell you about the toll on teenagers and children when they are faced with this kind of discrimination on a daily basis. Why is it that people identifying as LGBTQ are 2.5 times more likely to suffer from depression, anxiety, and substance misuse? Why is our LGBTQ youth 4 times more likely to attempt suicide? The answer, according to Mental Health America, lies in stigma, the lack of cultural sensitivity, and the unconscious and conscious reluctance to address sexuality. Let me tell you that these factors are not the only ones. I have gay friends who are threatened to be kicked out of their homes purely because of their orientation. I have transgender friends who have been asked to be called by their birth name instead of their chosen name so that they wouldn't be outed to their families. I have LGBTQ friends who are scared that their bosses at work will fire them if they ever found out about their identity. Let me tell you this. Before same-sex marriage was legalized across the United States in 2015, the American Journal of Public Health showed that couples who lived in states without discriminatory policies were mentally healthier than those who didn't. I want you to see that LGBTQ people are just like anyone else. Teenagers, like Rachel and my friends, want to blossom in adulthood. They want to chase their dreams, establish careers, go into homeownership, and start families. I can tell you, as treasurer of the GSA, that Medina's children are terrified. Let them have legal protections, let them be treated just like anyone else, and please, do not let their traumas and discriminations bleed into the next phase of their lives. I would now like to read a statement from a good friend of mine. She could not be here because her family did not want her to speak today. It pains me beyond belief that society can have such a skewed view on morality. How the same people who preach about community and love are so quick to crucify an entire group. Equality by law should mean everything, and yet somehow means nothing because we are having this debate today. Unfortunately, I cannot be here to deliver this plea to action myself, but I have complete faith that my pure strength and composure will be enough to convince you that this is a problem which plagues Medina even at our own high school level. Regardless, I would like to address the overwhelming support the LGBTQ community has at my school, and I also would like to strongly emphasize that there is still much room for improvement. Over my time at the high school, I've gotten involved in almost every activity or club the school has to offer. What this means is that I've personally been around classrooms filled to the brim with students passionately discussing their beliefs before concerts, club meetings, or even cross-country meets. High school students, in my experience, do not shy away from declaring what they think about a topic, and thus I've come to learn that our school is, overall, in support of LGBTQ rights. Likewise, passing this ordinance is vitally important because it affects so many citizens in our community, right down to the scared individuals I have the honor of working at MHS's GSA. Our students want acceptance, and for the most part, they feel it in our school. And it is entirely shameful that our community does not reflect those beliefs of equality. I'm writing today for those who can't, those who have been silenced by fear, whether that fear is their own or their parents. I'm writing for those scared they'll be harassed because of who they are and who they love. I'm writing because just last week my friend was called a creature that deserves to be run over by a truck, all because of who she loves. Society may have gotten better, but Medina is nowhere near as progressive as it should be, which is why we must pass this ordinance. For those of you suffering in fear, I would like to assure you that this does not take away any of your rights. It merely assures that our LGBTQ friends and family are guaranteed the same equality under the law that they should be assured under the Fourth Amendment, but evidently are not. This ordinance can only mean good things for our community: acceptance, diversity, and inclusion. Time and time again, it has been found that these three components build a better community. It is far beyond time for us to stimulate this chain reaction of societal improvement. Work being done at the state level has not progressed in a decade, and therefore it is our civic duty to rise to the occasion and address the issue of inequality in our own local community. We must rise to the occasion and be the change our youth believes we can be. Medina has to do better. Your youth believes in you. Don't let us down. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. I think all of us are available for questions and will be happy to provide additional information as needed. We recognize that this is a process, but we urge you to undertake this effort with due speed and to move this request out of committee to the full council for prompt consideration. 150 years ago, Medina was a safe haven for fleeing slaves, with several underground railroad stations in our city. As our bicentennial year comes to a close on November 30th, let's renew our history as a place all can feel safe, a city where no person is a second-class citizen. Look into the eyes of those in the LGBT community, at their families, friends, and neighbors, and tell them, yes, you deserve the same rights everyone else has that we have. Thank you.
Well, thank each and every one of you, and I thank you as a whole. You know, for I know the time and effort that you put into bringing the presentation and really for many of you bringing your stories to us tonight. It was I don't know, it was beyond a comprehensive presentation. The information was Alan. You know, I didn't read all these letters. Some high school kids wrote to me and asked me to read their letter, and I couldn't read it because I felt I'd have to read all of them, and I didn't want to do that. That's the reason I tried to sum it up in the beginning. But Alan, because I've known you for a long, long time, since I was just a young man, I've got to tell you, your story, which I read when you sent your letter, when I read your letter, brought tears to my eyes, and it's not because I know you, but when you presented it again, it's probably the first time since, you know, one of my parents died, I think, that I actually thought I might cry. It is very hard to hear. This I know, though. I've been here a long time. I've been here before, and every time we have had an issue that sometimes seems like it's overdue or it's the right thing to do, but then we're not sure. This community has come around and fully addressed the issue. And as many of you spoke about the great success of this community, the beauty of this community, the you know, our booming economic success, our beautiful square, all the things we have going, our fantastic school system, beautiful neighborhoods, safe neighborhoods, safe places for most of us to live. You know, we have always dealt with those issues in a way that, you know, we bring people together and we get a successful outcome. And with this issue, it should be my expectation is it will be no different. Hope is not enough generally because it is a pretty hungry ghost, but I am very hopeful that, you know, working with the people here on this committee that I know very well, working with an administration that is not only talented, but is committed to collaboration and goal-oriented approach to issues. I am confident that we will, in a timely way, Pam, in a timely way, we will bring we have two ordinances, I guess is what I need to say. We have two different ordinances that we can speak to, you know, briefly tonight. We have one that you worked on and I'm relatively familiar with. And then we have another that we were fortunate that the administration put together. And those two ordinances have some things that have really brought us closer together. There are some similarities, but there are some differences. And for us as a group, in order to arrive at, you know, to be successful, we need to find a way to end up with one ordinance that in the best situations, it would be one ordinance that members of the administration, majority members of council, and broader community, of course, would support, and in the end would provide the protections that you have all spoken so just absolutely, you've spoken so well too. That is our goal. And I'm going to open up to, my colleagues here, Councilman Shields and Councilman Rose, to see what, comments they would like to share or their observation on what you've talked about or where we go. And then, of course, to the administration. There are some other business people here that I think would like to speak, and then there is, we will have some limited time for anybody else that would like to share something with us, to also, help to inform us as we go forward with this. My expectation is that if both of, if we all agree, we'll move this on to continue this in special legislation so that we can work to get that singular ordinance. And then once we do that, then it would move on to the full council. So with that, Councilman Shields.
No, I got it. No, I appreciate everybody speaking tonight. I did want to make a couple comments on at least two of the speakers. Obviously, Aaron, I've known you a long time, known your family. I'm very proud of you tonight. Appreciated everything you said. Proud of your mom, too, because I know she's been such a great support for you, and she's a good friend and a good person in this community, and just very proud of you also, Amy. Sarah, I don't know you, but boy, what a speech. Very proud of you as a high school student. Obviously, I have a little bias for Medina High School, but you really represented well tonight, so thank you. And thank you, everybody who spoke this evening. I do want to make sure we give a chance if there's anybody else who wants to speak. I think Bill said it well, that we're trying to do the right thing here. Just give us some time to work through it and help us learn. I appreciate everybody here tonight trying to educate us. And, I think we all on this council and this administration want to do what's right. And we're all very proud of Medina and always try to do right by the citizens of Medina. So bear with us. It takes a little while, Pam. You know as well as anybody that things never move as quickly as you want it to. But I think everybody's committed here to try to move things forward and do it in the right way. Thank you.
Councilman Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, thank all of you for coming here this evening. It's not often that we have a group of residents and citizens here to pack this rotunda here, so thank you all. It is impressive. Thank you all for your stories and the information that you shared with us. It's quite a bit of information. A lot of it has to be processed, and to echo and not repeat much with Mr. Shields and Mr. Lamb, it takes a while. As I responded to one person who reached out to me personally, I'm going to get all the facts, make the right decision for everybody, and give us time. Thank you.
Mayor, Mr. Huber.
I'd just like to thank everybody for coming. I think we were all educated tonight. I think we have a better understanding of what some or all of you may be experiencing or have experienced, and that's helpful to all of us. My hope and prayer is that we can work together and create an ordinance that's acceptable to you, that's acceptable to the council, that's acceptable to the administration, and acceptable to our businesses. And sometimes the council and the administration are kind of in a position where we're trying to balance a number of interests. So the best we can do is to try to come to a resolve where we meet as many of your needs and as many of the needs of the businesses to ensure that we aren't correcting one thing and creating a harm with another. That's what my interest is. And again, I thank you all.
Greg, do you want to address this at all, or are you good?
My name's Greg Huber. I work as the law director for the city of Medina, and I was tasked with learning more about the constitutional issues that involve this legislation. I think in part there are difficulties with the initial proposals. This area of law is new. It involves constitutional law this law would have, initially at least, require a local forum, hear complaints, and decide what are essentially constitutional issues. Really, the proper and best forum for resolution of those issues is, in fact, our federal system, because they deal with constitutional law. I think this push for local legislation comes from disappointment over the fact that our federal system has moved slowly. Although, in educating myself, I find that the federal law is starting to come around. At this point, the EEOC is considering, or does include, transgender issues within Title VII, which may not make sense to everybody. It's a far step from where they were, and this area of law is starting to develop. One of the problems with, and the devil's always in the detail, one of the problems with passing legislation at the local level, where the federal level is somewhat undeveloped, is, or involves the uncertainty as to whether what you're doing at the local level is right. We don't deal with constitutional law here, and there's not a lot of horsepower in terms of lawyers in the law department, and there's not going to be a great deal of knowledge base in dealing with constitutional issues at a local level. The initial proposals with the legislation I first received include imposition of penalties that involve attorney's fees, compensatory damages, tort damages, fines, and injunctive relief. These are pretty heavy penalties, and imposing those penalties where the area of law is still somewhat undeveloped is problematic. I'm not sure of all of the answers to that. The ordinance that Councilman Lamb referenced was an ordinance that we drafted that is a little less aggressive, involves mediation and conciliation as opposed to imposing damages in the way that the initial legislation was proposed. I've been a musician all my life. I have friends who are gay who are friends all my life. And I met with 5 of them last week to look at some of this legislation because I'm curious as to how they view it. And each one of them, for what it's worth, also thought that it's hard to win the hearts and minds of the general population when you're passing government legislation that more or less kind of takes a hard stance in imposing damages, attorney's fees, and those kinds of things. So we're going to work on it, do the best we can.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Huber. There are council people here that are not on this committee. I know Councilman Simpson is here, and Councilman Heffinger is here. Yep, right there. And the President of Council, John Coyne, is here, and I don't know if any of you would, want to make a comment at this point. Do they have a microphone?
Oh, Denny's too slow, so.
Please introduce yourself.
Thanks. I'm President John Coyne. I didn't say you were too old. I said you were too slow. So, I'm President John Coyne, and I've had the opportunity to serve the city of Medina now for 20 years. So maybe I am old. But after hearing the stories, and I am an attorney, I think about the law maybe too often, and I think about the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States about equal protection. And I wonder, back in the day when everything started out early in the 1800s, I remember stories going through law school regarding, women don't have the right to vote. They're not the same as men. So we start out on a continuum where the differences in people are always pointed out and they're discriminated against. And it started out with women, and then they had the opportunity to vote when they weren't allowed to. And then we move into race, and then we move into handicaps and ethnicity and all those different things that come up as you go through time, because people, when they look at each other, if they're different from yourself, you often wonder, well, that's not right. That something has to be wrong. And it takes time for people to understand and to, I guess, conceptualize the differences are okay. That's what makes America. I think that with the differences in people, there becomes opportunities because everybody has something different to offer. And if we just listen to people, we can find out that there's some great ideas from everybody. And listening to everybody here, it's very obvious, and I guess I'm a strong proponent of non-discrimination, because I don't think discrimination in any form is good for the country or good for a community, because I think it only divides community and causes hate. And I don't think we, as representatives of the community, want to promote anything that would perpetuate hate or encourage hate amongst people based on anything, because we want a community that's able to grow. I've been involved throughout the years in developing the community and been proud of working with the administration and other members of council in bringing businesses and improving the square and making this a great place for people to live and even a better place for people to visit. Because I think the goal is we want people to come to Medina and remember Medina. We want people to come to Medina and say, no, that's a great community. I want to live there. And things that we do, hopefully, most of the time, encourage that type of behavior, because I think that we truly believe we want to do what's best for the community. I don't think anybody really says, I really don't want to do that for the community because I just don't like that. We have to look at everybody and make sure that the decisions that we make take into consideration the entire community and how can we move this community forward. The community is a continuum. We're only here for a short period of time, but can we leave something behind and provide a roadmap for the future for those that follow us? They understand where we're coming from and they have a great direction of where we want to go. So with that being said, I've looked at both legislations that were offered, and as far as the housing and employment and public accommodation sections, I mean, they're very similar in nature about what is discrimination based upon those areas of importance. The one area that I still need a little bit more education on is the remedies section, because I always think as a lawyer, well, if you break the law, you go to a court and you go in front of your peers, and if you're guilty, then you're punished. But this is a little different. I guess I'm not aware of this. I'm just a real estate lawyer, so I'm trying to learn a little bit more about this. But I think that if anybody wants to actively and outwardly discriminate, I don't think that's a good thing for our community. And I think that, they got to be held accountable for their actions. So I just need to learn more about the remedies, and I appreciate all the information because I'm more aware of what's going on out there in our community. And I think it's been very helpful for everybody's comments and direction that they've been giving us. But I appreciate the opportunity to listen to you. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Now, what John failed to mention when he said he wanted everybody to come and visit Medina, he failed to mention that he wants them to spend their money in Medina too, which is going to help everybody here. I would like to thank Bill and the committee for organizing this tonight. Pam, for your efforts. When I got involved in politics 16 years ago, at the local level, there was people that influenced me that I wanted to emulate, Pam Miller being one of them, and she's not let me down throughout the years. She's spearheaded a lot of different things. Nationally, there's been a lot of national politicians that have made comments and introduced legislation that has inspired me. And I'm not going to go into names, but the one that always sticks by me 100% of the time, and I don't think there's a day that goes by, especially in the political atmosphere that we have now nationally. And, everybody's getting so sick and tired, even the state commercials that's on television. But we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And that could never be more true than it is today when we're talking about national and state politics. Doesn't matter what party you're representing, it holds true. I was so impressed tonight by all the comments that I heard. I was fortunate enough to attend one of the coffees last year. and was impressed with the students that I was able to meet. Alan, I read your letter, and it broke my heart, and thankfully you're back in Medina now, correct?
I did a reverse. I retired from Florida to my hometown.
Okay. Welcome back. And I know the administration and council will work hard to come up with a resolution to what has been presented to us tonight. I believe that in my heart. But I also want to just ask you and remind you, contact your state representatives. My wife has been corresponding with Mr. Hambley on State Bill 160, which is basically kind of the same idea that we're going through here. When one of the gentlemen up here mentioned that this is a long process, it's long at the local level, it's really long at the state level, and even longer at the national level. But I think Mr. Hambley has assured us that it is in the process. Hopefully our legislation will be done long before that, but when the state's legislation is passed, and in my heart of hearts, I don't want to think of it failing. I want to think that it is going to pass, and it will supersede anything that we're going to pass here and the other 21 communities that have already passed this. So again, God bless you, and thank you for all your hard work and your comments tonight, and now the work's on our shoulders. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Heffinger. I am the Ward 3 City Councilman. I'm the new guy here. Since this was introduced, actually, we first started talking about this. The first presentation that was brought to the City Council was actually one of my first meetings coming in for when I applied for this job. So I've been here through the process, and since that came up, people have been approaching me about this, and it's been overwhelmingly in support of passing this resolution. A lot of the stories that have really stuck with me are very similar to the ones that we heard tonight, and that was mostly from parents who feel that they have lost their kids because they moved out of the area. They felt like they couldn't stay here, and that's unfortunate for Medina because we're losing talent. When we talk about the business aspect, we're losing a lot of talented people. I work at a high school. I have a fair amount of LGBTQ students. And when they're out and they're supported, they thrive. And when they feel scared, they shrink inside and they don't do as well. A lot of these kids would be amazing additions as adults to our community if they can live and work here. And I think that we should build that support network for them so that they can come here. You know, I work in Wadsworth, so they're not really part of our community, but they're in our county. Make a business, really thrive here. Cuyahoga County has passed this resolution like this already. It won't take much for us to lose those people. They only have to drive up the road and find a job that they feel more secure in, a house that they feel more secure in. So business-wise, I really, really believe that this is something we should step forward towards. The other point I want to take away from this is safety and security. I feel safe in my house. I feel secure in my house. I feel safe and secure in my job. It devastates me that everyone cannot feel that way. As city officials, I believe it's our job to make a city safe and secure. That's what you put us here for. That is what we are supposed to do. The state won't do it, so I really think it falls on our shoulders to step up and make sure that all of our citizens feel safe and secure here. I do have some questions about the accountability part of it, how we rule on this as we look at the different forms of legislation, but I overwhelmingly hope that the rest of the people on the council with me support this bill and that we pass some kind of strong resolution.
Thank you. There are some business people here that have asked to, that have come and have asked to speak, and we're going to give them an opportunity to speak as well. And then if there is anybody else who came particularly because you want to speak, I know it's getting late, But then I'm going to open the floor for a few more people if you would like to contribute anything to this to the discussion. So if there are some business people that are here right now that would like to speak, if you are here, okay. Hi, how are you? Good to see you.
My name is Mike Bach, and I'm actually currently unaffiliated. I retired in June, and then promptly the following week was on a trip to 5 different airports, working for businesses and trying to encourage economic development, especially in our area here. I was the economic development director for the city here. I am very steeped in a belief that we have a tremendous community. We hear of all the awards that we win and that this is the place to live, and I truly believe that. And listening to these stories, I find absolutely horrendous that such types of harassment would go on. I can tell you anything that I've been involved in, whether it be the government or our businesses, I've not only not seen it, it wouldn't be tolerated. And regardless of what law gets passed, I think we have to do a better job to make sure that people understand these things are going on. Because those of us that I think matter wouldn't let that happen, or we'd at least step in and help. But my concern, and again, I believe that the administration, the council, will get together and figure out the right thing to do. But the right thing to do isn't necessary to hurry and get something done. I am hopeful this isn't there's not a big election going on here where somebody's trying to use this to be in the paper or anything like that. I would be very disappointed if that were the case. If you're doing it to do the right thing, I applaud you. The one thing that businesses will be concerned with, and you cannot legislate people from stopping their behavior, because I think what we talked about a lot and what I heard had to do with harassment, not necessarily discrimination. And maybe I'm confused. I'm certain there is some form of fine line, but some of the stories I heard, I'm not certain that the legislation you're talking about would stop. But set that all aside, and thankfully Mr. Huber, who I know, said it in a way that I won't sound now, I hope, that I am not insulting anyone. We have a law, and when complaints are brought, we will have to adjudicate them. And there are, from what I've read, some pretty stiff penalties involved. And looking from afar, if I'm a company taking a look at an environment, I don't necessarily look at what the law is. In fact, we are in a community where our city council passed something that sounded good, and the issue didn't matter. It was somewhat, as I saw, capricious in its manner, and it wasn't well thought out. And quite frankly, when you find out that you have a legislative body that doesn't think things through very well, it makes you concerned about coming to an area or from growing there. And again, I think this is a tremendous community. I think the attitude generally is good. I'm appalled to have heard some of the things that I did. But what I do believe is that a law won't necessarily fix those. So let's be careful, because I would ask, are we sophisticated enough to be adjudicating these and then handing out penalties? Because businesses do take a look at what the laws are. Do these belong in the hands of the city? Or are these truly better to be handled by the state? I think this is a federal issue, but things take forever on the federal level. I'm sympathetic to everything that you have to say. And I hope you know, from my perspective, it took a little bit of courage to come up here, because I'm not criticizing or saying anything that is against what you're trying to do. But I think you gotta be very careful with this. And know too that if you pass a law based on what I saw, that stops discrimination. First, laws don't stop anything. I think I went through a stop sign on the way here, in fact. But it in the end, what you're trying to do is create good behavior. And I agree with that. And we, in companies that I've been involved with, we do not accept any kind of discrimination. We don't accept harassment. But is this law going to change anything? And if we do pass this law, is it something that we can manage and handle? Because the last thing I want to see after working so hard to create jobs here by encouraging companies to come here, to have an unintended consequence of something that we thought was going to be done that was the right thing, tear down a whole bunch of things that we didn't intend for it to happen. But I wish everybody here a tremendous life, a happy life. If there's anything that I as a person can do or any entity I belong in, what you're talking about I know is heartfelt. Our hearts as business people go out to all of you. In terms of council, though, we're talking about passing a law. The last thing that I just want to comment, because in looking at this whole thing, I asked some of the participants, even some that spoke here, are there any examples? Because if we're passing a law, generally you do it because there's something you want to point to that you want to stop. And again, we spoke a lot about issues relating to harassment, but discrimination for housing and employment and things like that. I asked specifically, are there issues that we're trying to address? Are we putting a law in place? And I did hear some stories here tonight that are different from what the answer I got. But people said no, they hadn't heard of any, but this is the right thing to do. If it's the right thing to do, you got to make sure that you do it the right way with the right language and you're prepared to manage what you put in place. Or is this something better handled at a higher level? So with that, I appreciate your giving me the time, and thank you.
Okay. Anybody else who would like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Stan Sheets. I'm an attorney here in Medina. I'm a hotelier, I'm a builder and developer, and an entrepreneur in our community. And I have some of the similar concerns that Mr. Bach raised. And again, I surely empathize with every position that has been taken here. One of my law partners is gay. We've worked together since the 1970s. I've never had any issues whatsoever. My neighbors are lesbians, have no problem whatsoever. We get along just fine and support everything they do. But I have the same concept and issue as a lawyer with the term unanticipated consequences that can occur from the penalties or the prohibitions within this law. And I have a personal example myself of dealing with this, only it was with ADA. And I've been a builder and developer for over 40 years. In that entire 40 years, I never had one complaint in relation to building or developing and providing reasonable accommodations for people, whether they be tenants or whether they be homeowners, apartment dwellers, or condominiums. However, the issue becomes who brings these actions, and I know it's anticipated that the actions would solely be brought by individuals. But what we've found in the practice many times that many of the advocacy groups get involved and testers get involved coming into areas and then bring, quote, class actions in relation to the potential violations. And every single paragraph that provides a prohibition is possible for mediation or potential litigation. The one I was involved in went on for 2.5 years, over $25,000 in legal fees in relation to a civil rights claim. We had 3 handicapped people living in the building, had no issues whatsoever from any of those individuals with the condominiums that we had provided. But however, an agency came in, measured the threshold to our door, and it turned out the threshold was 1/2 inch higher than was allowed by the standards. And from that, then they entered our construction site. And by the time we were done, we had to alter 8 condominium units in one building, revise the size of the bathrooms in every one, revise the size of the bedrooms in every one. And it led to the company actually going out of business because there were only 14 units in the entire development. And it ate up so much time and in fees and expenses. And it is just a unanticipated potential consequence that you have to realize you could be dealing with. Plus, as I looked at the regulations, when you were looking at the fines, the mediation steps, and the number of people that need to be appointed to those different positions, I wonder what specific education do those people have in relation to passing on some of these decisions or making those decisions. And I would think also that this is most adequately to be heard probably in the federal level when you're dealing with these constitutional issues. But again, I surely support everything that's been said and empathize completely with these issues that have come before us. But I just say to take your time in making the final legislation, and I surely support something in the form of a legislation that would be fair and equitable to the individuals and to the businesses in our community. I thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to address our committee before I make my final statement?
My name is James Simonelli. I live in Sharon Township, but I am involved in many ways in Medina County. Your obligation, your responsibility is to eliminate fear. You can't obliterate hate, but you can eliminate fear by enforcing a law that says you cannot discriminate. Sure, there is prejudice, but there cannot be discrimination. So in this opportunity for you to do something, whether it's at the minuscule municipal level or influencing the federal level, which at this point seems impossible, it's your opportunity, your obligation, your necessity to make sure that people can be alleviated from the pain and the fear that comes with the solitude and the horror of being the target of prejudice and hate.
What?
I'm happy to go in either order.
Okay. Go ahead, sir.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm president and CEO of a local company, and I wanted to be brief.
Yeah.
We live in an age where it's a black and white political season, and I'm fearful that those of us who have concerns about this ordinance will be painted as those who support discrimination and those who support harassment, and there's nothing more profoundly untrue. The harassment that you experienced is disgusting, and you will find that most and all businessmen, or actually all businessmen that I know, do not support discrimination. I heard about firing in the people being fired because they're LGBT. To be honest, for me to sit here and talk about firing someone who is LGBT, it's against the law for me to even know that you're LGBT. I cannot ask you during an interview. I can't ask you during work, and even if there are rumors, it's not in my place and not anyone in my business's place to respond or even harass. As Mike was saying, harassment and discrimination will not be tolerated. My concern with the ordinance is that we heard a lot of emotional and gut-wrenching testimony about harassment and about fear. The ordinance is about discrimination. I'm not sure if the ordinance is going to address fear and harassment. I think we need to be clear that harassment in any form against any group should not be tolerated. And I believe that there are laws in this town and everywhere across this country that should be enforced to prevent harassment. The fear aspect, again, is in some sort, in some degree, is an unknown. But again, it's not lawful for a business to know whether your sexual preference is. It's not lawful for a business to discriminate against your sexual preference, and to be fired, to be fired in any business. There is a book of merit-based problems that has to be generated in order to fire anyone, regardless if they're LGBT or not. So my concern for everyone, or my concern for the ordinance, and I mimic the comments earlier, is that we understand and we certainly support the need to be inclusive and not be not to be discriminatory to anyone. And we certainly are I'm profoundly disgusted by the harassment claims that I've seen or heard, or harassment I've heard. But I would ask the council to be very careful and make sure that there are proper avenues of accountability as well as proper avenues of appeal for anyone who is accused of being discriminatory in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you just say your name?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
My name is Elizabeth Schmidt. My permanent address for the entirety of my life has been 4282 State Road. I'm a resident of Medina County in Granger Township. And I have kept my permanent address in Medina County even when I've lived abroad, because I consider Medina to be my home. I wanted to speak briefly about the question of mediation in the second ordinance versus the first, because I study conflict management at Kent State University, and as such, a significant portion of my academic program is spent studying mediation. I'm a huge proponent of mediation. It has been shown time and time again to have better results in cases that are very technical. But in order to mediate responsibly, you have to know your limits. And one of those limits is when you can personalize or isolate a societal issue. Identity-based discrimination is not appropriate for mediation because it does just that. It takes a societal problem, it takes an issue of who we consider human and who we consider legitimate parts of this community, and isolates it in a personal case. In addition, identity-based discrimination is not appropriate for mediation because it is an issue of power. When we're talking about discrimination and harassment of LGBTQ people, we are talking about a power imbalance. We are talking about generations of people who the state has tried to silence, and who, when they come forward with the claim of harassment and discrimination, are coming forth in a state of fear. It's true that we need to be addressing hearts and minds. We have to be addressing behavior. But in the meantime, if we don't have the power of the law, we are allowing people like Matthew Shepard, whose body was just laid to rest, to slip by. And so sure, I would love to see change at the federal level. But in the meantime, I hope and I pray that my community of Medina is not going to be willing to risk the lives and the livelihood of LGBTQ people. I was very lucky to grow up in the Church Unity of Medina, just a few minutes away from here, where it was clear that love is the most central part of being human, and it is also the most central part of the divine. And being able to love who you love and to have a family is the most basic human right. It is the most basic part of who we are as a community, as well as an individual. As a bisexual woman, I am one of the people who is going to choose whether I live in Medina when I come back to be with my mother when she is older, or if I'm going to live and pay taxes in Akron or Cuyahoga Falls. But again, this is an issue that is bigger than economics. This is an issue of human rights. And even if economics and business and taxes weren't in the picture, what is really being asked is what our civic duty is as a community, and that is to ensure the rights of all people with proper legislation. Thank you.
One second. If you look at the clock, it's 9. Is there anybody else who thinks they want to speak tonight? Okay, we're gonna have one more conversation. Then we're gonna wrap this up, and we'll move along. Bruce.
Mr. Chairman, I own a company called Halcyon Facade Service. We troubleshoot and repair problem skylights, window systems. I can't afford to discriminate. We have a simple test for new employees. We take them up to the 10th floor of the roof. We attach a safety harness and a rope, and we throw them off the building. If they come back the next day, they're hired. Very simple. But I understand, and from hearing the comments today from Ms. Miller and her group, I can understand the concerns and problems they have. But as a business owner, we have problems too. One of the things that I noticed in the legislation that proposed by Ms. Miller and her group was that for penalties imposed on the accused for someone who has a complaint and they bring it forward, there was an issue of attorney fees. So they had repercussion to come back and to recoup their fees and that they've paid attorneys. But as a business owner, what happens when someone comes and makes a complaint to you and about you? What recourse do you have when that complaint is found not valid? You're asking business owners now to bear the burden without any repercussion against a unjustified complaint. I understand that by imposing the same logic to the complainant, you may inhibit those from coming forward. But as a business owner, and no offense to Mr. Coyne or Mr. Huber or Mr. Sheets, but once the attorneys get involved, everyone loses. So, excuse me, that's right. So we have concerns about that. The other issue I have is that in both proposals, it's offering a suggestion to have one person doing the mediation from the city administration. And because I've been involved in the city on several committees and at council and that, I have a lot of trust in the current administration. We don't know what happens 10 years from now. Where that leads us, I don't know, but we need to have a little more balance within the committee. So I would hope that those who in the administration will be more than one person and will definitely be qualified, as Mr. Huber brought the point up. And we moved here to Medina. We didn't live here all of our lives. We love it here. We chose to be here to start our business, and we want to continue that. I'm just hoping that we can get a legislation that works out and is acceptable to all parties, both business and the LGBT community. Thank you.
Okay. No? Okay.
Getting ready to go.
Okay, did everybody get an opportunity to speak then that chose to do that? Listen. Oops. And could you state your name, please?
Yeah, I'm Susan Schmidt, and I'm a business owner and an employer in Medina County. I live in Granger Township. If I created a product that did not meet legal specifications, I would have to fix it. I would expect to have to fix it. And I appreciate the risk that a business owner takes. Believe me, I appreciate it when you produce products for the general public. And still, I find that with supporting the needs of the people who I sell my products to, by caring about their needs, by taking responsibility up front. When I make a mistake, I fix it. And if it's expensive, I still have to fix it. And so I want to stand as a business owner and say, if I'm doing something that is breaking a moral law or I would hope to be held to account in some way. As a mediator, if there is no penalty for not coming to a solution in a mediation, people can walk away and there is no difference for the person who has been hurt and who is bringing forth the complaint. There has to be some kind of penalty. And so as a business owner, I think it's important that we take responsibility for what we do and the products we produce so that I'm having a senior moment. I think it's important that we take responsibility and fix and be held account in some way. I support mediation as a mediator, and I need, as a mediator, some kind of stick that will encourage people to come to a solution that doesn't involve those attorneys. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think we've heard from just about everybody, and a couple things to close up. One is John Coyne. I would correct you only that this country has come a very long way, but at the inception of this country, with the Constitution, the only people that could vote were white men who owned property. That was followed by the only people that could vote would be men. And that was followed by the only people that could vote would be white men, rather, and then African American men could vote, and that was followed in the early part of the 20th century that we included women to vote, and I think it wasn't until 1920 or 1930 that if you were a Native American, if you were an Aboriginal American, you were allowed to vote. Up until that point, I don't think Native Americans were allowed to vote either. So we have come a long way. We have come a long way in this country in correcting things to make a more perfect union. And listen, we don't. I don't, no one here, council administration wants to paint anybody here as being prejudiced, racist in any way, form, or shape whatsoever. Our intention is to address this issue, which has been brought to us in a very enlightening way, informative way, that for many of us, the particulars of the issues certainly could hardly be familiar to us, or for us to understand the depth and the seriousness of the issues that occur, because like somebody said, we don't know. I don't know. And as far, Alan, I'm going to mention you again. I mean, I've known you for decades, and I had no idea until I read that letter, that you would face those types of issues. So going forward, I know that we will, on the committee, we will as a total council, working with the administration, we will work in a smart way. We'll take into account everything that we've heard, be it from, business people who clearly spoke about concerns that they have, all of you folks that made the presentation, and other people that spoke, so that we come up with a resolution, that we come up with an answer that actually deals with the fundamental problems that we've discussed. Because we're not just here to do something and feel good about it. We want to do something that seriously matters. And the last thing I'm going to leave you with is this. There were some high school students, some young people that spoke tonight. And I was thinking about, not too long ago, I was a high school kid, or a junior high kid, a middle school kid. And I am a white, straight male. But I was thinking back to when I was in 7th, 8th, 9th grade, and the issues that I ran into occasionally, where I had anxiety, or I had fear, or I felt like I was isolated. And I was thinking, what would that have meant to me if I had those kind of feelings? And I suddenly realized that people in my community that have the power to help me, that are actually talking about something that is an issue, an anxiety, a fear that I live with, how would I have felt then? And I thought, you know what? Simply, wherever we go with this, however it does end up, we are all hopeful. But the fact that we sat here and talked about these issues in the manner that we did, and in an incredibly responsible way, nobody accusing, nobody attacking, just legitimate, heartfelt conversation. If I was that kid in 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, I would have seen that as, wow, somebody out there, there are people out there that actually care about me. And when we go away from here, if one child, one kid in one school thinks that, that was great. Thank you all very much. We got to close the meeting. Meeting's adjourned.
There you go. All right.